Yeah, so recording now.
Perfect. So there's been a little conversation going on in the zeitgeist on the interwebs. And there was this woman who is a mental health coach. And she says, oh yeah, I think it might be, if we could play the video, that'd be great.
You see, this is a 7.
About your doctorate because people can't find
Oh,
your
okay.
dissertation online.
So, yeah.
How are you responding to that in this new era of your life?
I'm going to clear it up once on here. I'm not doing it again. And I'm clearing it up for my doc squad, for my fan base, for my audience who deserve to hear me address it. For the folks who have already made up their mind to not like me or not understand me, listen, I don't give a fuck what your narrative is. I would like for you to recreate it, double down on it, and run that shit. Because I don't give a fuck about it. Now, to my doc squad, my fan base, my folks, you know, my village, it's very simple. I went to a school, Argosy University, completed an entire program. I went back online to get my official transcripts because I was applying to a law school many years ago to be a professor there. And I had to provide my transcripts, right, to get hired. And I went to contact the school and say, hey, I need my official transcripts. I need my entire thing. And there was no school. I was like, okay, I'm confused. I Google. It says this school has been shut down. I said, oh, well, they got to have records. I mean, they were accredited when I attended the school. They were accredited when I finished the program. I go and look, there is a third party that has the records. Why I contact the third party? That third party only holds records for 2 years. I was past my 2 years. So that means that I had no access to records. And then I contacted, financial aid. You can't make up financial aid. It shows that I paid for a doctoral program alongside my master's program and my undergrad program. And they said, we can fully refund you your money under one circumstance. We give you your money back. You don't get credit for not a class, a course, a program you took in this university, at this institute. So do you want us to refund you? Or do you want us not? I said no, because I didn't want to risk the chance of them saying, well, we're going to give you back your money, and it wipes out your entire program. Luckily, I had, I do this with all of the schools. I had downloaded from the actual student portal my transcripts at that time, and I was able to get just about all of my transcripts, including up to like dissertation. But everything else, there's just no holding take for any of our records, which I think is completely effed up.
Yeah, me too.
Going to kill you.
Yeah, we're going to kill him. Now, look at the comments. She's a doctor like Dr. Dre. Spoiler alert, the dissertation doesn't exist. I mean, they killing her because that answer is, go ahead, sorry.
It's not how that goes at all.
Could you let me share my screen, please? Because there is something I want to show. So if you take a look at this, if you look my name up and dissertation, you will find my dissertation. And I even selected it to be available for anybody to be able to view and see and read in full, in totality online. Chances are, if you type in somebody's first and last name, if they have a dissertation, you should be able to find at least the reference. And then if they made it available to be able to download and view, you should be able to find it. Robin, not to put you on the spot, but
I didn't realize this, but yes.
does yours show up?
Yes, it does. In fact, many links show up that I like, oh my gosh, why are all these things showing up here? Not in a bad way, but in a I don't really Google myself sort of way. So, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with this individual, this doctor, that's not the case. So
Yeah, there should be some paper trail, especially if you graduated within the last 25, 30 years and you did it on a computer. There should be, if you did it on a typewriter, a lot of the times it's still available. And if you did it on a typewriter. It may not be available in the PDF form. You may have to go through some extra steps, but there should be at least a reference so that people can find it in the records of the university. Now, it may not be in the records of the university, but on ProQuest, on different online libraries, it should be able to be found in some way. If it doesn't exist online, that's a red flag. Another red flag is that she doesn't have a copy of it. Let me show you something real quick.
Who doesn't
Not
have a
everybody
copy of their own dissertation that they spent years on?
not everybody has this. I have a physical copy that's bound. Look at me.
Legit.
And it's a copy of my dissertation. Not only do I have this, I have electronic copies, multiple, because I have the outline from the original one, multiple different versions throughout its course and its shaping, because I was working on it. I was adding the methods, the introduction, the discussion, the graphs, the figures, and I was getting feedback. So I was constantly shaping it. I have probably at least 20 different versions of my dissertation and different parts of it on my computer still. Now, I just did mine last year. So I may have more than most because some people go through different computers, different laptops, don't have access to every single version. That's totally understandable. You know what else I have? I have emails. I have emails that I've sent to my different committee members and different. So I still have access to my university email from when I graduated from Penn State. Not everybody has that, but I do have those emails, and I can email somebody that has those emails as well. So it not being anywhere on this earth is crazy. It's wild.
Has she published in any other realm? Because I was actually going to look. Yeah, no, not really. So, yeah, that's the thing. Like, if there's absolutely no paper trail, there's no indication of scholarly work or anything. And I'm not one of those snobs that say if you haven't published, then you're not an expert. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah,
And I will call those people snobs until the end of time.
definitely.
But you can't go around saying that you are a scholar, and you cannot go around calling yourself a doctor if you don't have the paper trail to back that up. It's like receipts or it doesn't count. And that's simply not how a registrar of a university would work. And even in the comments, I believe that I saw on Instagram, people who went through the same school that did close, that is a fact, still have access to their records. They can still get their transcript. And I'm sorry, but like, on what planet does the United States of America offer a refund for your education? That is not a thing. There's a reason why there's a withdrawal period, because at that point you don't get any sort of financial aid reimbursement or anything like that, and it's usually like a week within a term. Like, it's not very
Hmm.
long. So I'm sorry, that's like the part that for me in this capitalist hellscape that we live in, that was the biggest red flag, because I was like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what school is going to give you a refund? That never happens.
She,
Yikes.
she, that long answer, she should be a politician. She would be a great
No
politician.
kidding.
She ducked and dodged that answer so well. She was ready. And she was like, this is the last time I'm addressing it. Yeah, it's hard to keep up with your lies.
I, it's a lot of work to tell lies. That is the thing. It's like I've always been just like brutally honest, and people are like, "Well, why don't you tell little white lies?" Because I don't want to have to remember that shit. Like,
Hmm.
not only that, it
Hmm.
doesn't make sense to me. Why would I tell you something that's not true and then have to like justify that later? I'm not gonna remember. I
Yeah.
barely remember what I did yesterday. Like, how am I gonna remember all that?
Exactly. And what if somebody goes to financial aid and somehow is like, "Hey, do y'all do that? Or did you offer that? Do you offer that?" And they're like, "No, we don't ever." I mean, I think it's going way too far to prove she's lying. Um, but a grifter is gonna grift. She's getting attention. I never knew who this person was before this. I made a video on Instagram and TikTok on this, and I said in like the description, tell us the title of your dissertation if you finished your dissertation and you earned a PhD. And the beautiful thing is a whole bunch of people sharing their dissertation titles and a whole bunch of people who are saying that they're saving this post so they can go and read all these dissertations. And I love that. That I think is a beautiful thing that came out of this. Just, sharing that information because dissertations and theses are often called gray literature. Gray literature often doesn't get cited. And if it doesn't get cited, it often doesn't get read. So I think that, if people want, putting that information out there to have people read it, I think is really cool. A lot of people, finish their dissertation, and if they continue publishing, they're like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of that. Because, the later, the further away you are from a publication, sometimes the less you view it as acceptable or a high mark, a lot of the times. So I just think it's really beautiful for that.
Agree. And that that distance, that gap in time that you talked about, the latency to responding with, publication, I mean, that's the pressures of society. And so it's all
Hmm.
internalized from all of that because we live in this, once again, capitalist hellscape where it's like if you're not producing and you're not doing that on an effective timeline, then you're not worth anything. And that's another thing. And I really, really hate, I'm really glad you mentioned the gray literature because when it comes to like student projects and student work, I'm okay with them including dissertations and theses. I'm totally good with this. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who would say, oh, you shouldn't include those because they're not considered um, publications, they're not considered journal articles, blah, blah, blah. If my students do cover that basis and add a supplemental thesis or dissertation, like I think it's great. I think that we can learn so much from each other's work, and I just want to throw out that that's just another way that academia gatekeeps people.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that a thesis or a dissertation should count as a publication. I really do because you put in the same work, you put in the same effort. It's out there, as you
Hmm.
said. If it's legit, it should be readily available and verifiable. So why does that not count?
Yeah, and you know what? Also, going further, adding on to your point, there are people that have their PhDs that supervise and help provide edits and feedback for these theses and these dissertations. And there's a whole bunch of citations. So it goes through a rigorous process of peer review. And it I don't think many professors or PhDs would put their identities on the line to allow garbage to be published. So when you look at a thesis or a dissertation, oftentimes it's critically evaluated so that the claims made are substantiated and verified, and those those works should be counted, like you said, as publications, which I count them as too. That what you're talking about, that gatekeeping is so true. Be counting what's publication, what's not, what's a high level of publication based on which journal came out of it, what's the impact level of this journal versus that journal. It's just I can't think of a better term. It's just a dick measuring contest between it all. And it's, often a boys' club, a white older men's club.
Up elbow with, yeah,
Hmm.
100%.
So,
Yeah,
yep,
so any of
that.
those old school excuses like, oh, but this is a peer reviewed journal. Okay, so let's kind of break that one down a little bit.
Hmm.
So in academic journals and everything, the only real qualification to become an editor is to basically have published work. And then you can also do peer review without having already published because I did it as a student. And that was a
Same.
way that I was able to get my feet wet in that process,
Hmm.
so to speak. And so, arguably, I had less experience then as a master's level practitioner who had not yet published, who was doing peer review for these major gatekeeping journals than I am now supervising these projects as a doctorate level. I've published several articles, I've published a book, I've done all these things, and you're telling me that that work that I put my name on is not as valid as when I reviewed things as a student and had no idea what I was doing? That's messed up. And that is a product of patriarchy and white supremacy. Mic drop.
Absolutely. And we can't assume that the peers that are reviewing are always right.
Right.
They could be, students that are just getting their feet wet, that are just learning had a peer review, which sometimes they are the best, to be honest, because they're actually engaged with the literature at that point
Yeah,
in time,
they're
more
thinking.
so than other people. Yeah, more so than other people that actually have jobs and other stuff at the same time. And then when you critically evaluate and critically read articles that have been published and passed through that peer review threshold, there are still often errors or problems you might see. I can't tell you how many times I've said, hey, just because we're reading this article doesn't mean we shouldn't also critically evaluate its claims, its reliability, its scientific rigor, and the processes that they use. Because there's a lot of times where it's like, I don't know. I know you were published. I know they said it was okay. Even when you're the person that puts in the manuscript for publication, the people that are reviewing it might try to say something, and it's like, you're wrong sometimes. Like, you're telling me this feedback for me to change something, but that's wrong. And I read the articles. Like, go, you do the work. Go read the articles that I'm citing, and then read what I'm saying, and then come to that conclusion. Because it's not, the math ain't mathin'. So there's all of that wrapped up in it as well. Science just helps us get to a closer truth to as things exist in nature, especially when it comes to our measuring of natural events, which is what I think both of you and I try to do. And it's not always going to be perfect, but the idea is to better make measurements, to better make decisions, to improve the quality of lives of the individuals we serve.
Yeah, or the individuals who we're conducting research with, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. Since we're talking about research, I'm kind of curious what you think about. We're veering a little bit off the outline here, but that's okay. This is all a
Yeah.
really important topic. What do you feel about the double blind process?
Whew. Okay, so I'm of two minds about this. So I spoke with somebody recently who was publishing and editing before the double blind process was often popular, at least in behavior analysis and precision teaching. And they felt it was better that way. When your name is on the line as the editor, it's different. You're going to do things differently. Also, when you see the name of the publisher or the person that's writing it, you see things a little bit differently too. And if it's a super niche area, there's often times where you can figure out who's the one who's giving you the reviews and who's the one that's writing the paper. There's a certain way, like in precision teaching, there's this thing called component composite analysis or an element compound analysis. If you use element compound, you come from a certain line of individuals that, like myself, that are under like Rick Kubina's camp, right? If you use element compound, then you're probably in the Morningside Academy camp over here, right? So like I can kind of detect where you're coming from, who you are. And I was editing a paper and I was like, it's probably this person. I was also editing another paper and I was like, oh, this is a constructivist. So they're probably coming from gold diamonds. So that means that they're probably with Joe Lang, which means that they're probably one of these people that are probably working at or coming from Indicate College. Yeah, Endicott College. I don't know. So you make these things. So I don't think that we should be doing double blind. I think it's a way that is a deviation of white supremacist ideologies of being objective when there's no such thing as being objective, as you're consistently influenced by your reinforcement and punishment history. What think you?
I love how you summarized all of that, and because I just kind of popped it on you. Um, I completely concur, and I concur in that regard as both a submitter for literature and as a peer reviewer. I've never been like an editor, and I don't know that I would want that because it's too much power and it scares me. Um, it's interesting because I feel that when you have no identity on the line, like you had said, you're protecting the same systems that were put in place from the beginning all along. And so, like, I can tell sometimes some context might be helpful here. So, I don't do fluffy go ABA research. I do research that is very challenging, that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you reflect and say, you know what, I've messed up. this isn't something that I should be doing. But to me, that's what research should be. Now, when myself and I'm really close to a particular peer. If you search my name, you'll probably find this peer because we do a lot of things together. We do a lot of presentations together, and you know the student who I'm talking about. And so we recently tried to get a study published that was basically a perspective on behavior analytic services with regard to autistic persons in leadership within autism clinics. And so we have been met with so much scrutiny on this. We've been tone policed on it. We've been told, well, you don't have a very positive outlook on ABA. And it's like, it's not us. We are being as objective as possible. We are removing ourselves from it. We are reporting on the information that we receive from people who are in these positions. And just because you don't like what they're having to say and you don't have confirmation bias, that's not cool. And so it's challenging because I could suspect the demographics of the peer reviewers who are looking at this literature, and I guarantee I would be willing to bet my right limb, and I'm right-handed, over the demographics of the individuals. But because it's a double-blind process, I can't see who those people are, and I can't know that those people are unsafe. And so that to me is a big issue, especially if you are a marginalized identity and you're trying to publish as a disabled woman, trying to publish on disabled individuals receiving services. It is concerning to me that you're protecting the identity of somebody who wants to continue to perpetuate that harm. And so for me, if I put a review on something, I would have no reservation whatsoever about having my name, my email, any of that if the authors wanted to reach out to me. And I feel that if you do have a problem with that, then you have something to hide and you shouldn't be in that position. That's my take.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that one thing you hit on there when you said that you had some responses in your research that weren't necessarily positive towards ABA, I think that's all the more reason why ABA people need to see and hear and sit with those responses, because those are valuable data points for us to make changes in our behavior. It's so often that it's the echo chamber and it's not enough of hearing the dissenters so that we can have a meaningful change in the way that we are not only publicly but practicing our science. And that's super powerful, because I'm always thinking, like, do I even want to make this content about ABA? Because it's not necessarily ABA positive, but it's addressing how, like, I got this one thing that's talking about reading is basically stimulus control, and I'm gonna make that content. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, do I even want to, like, I want to put this out there because I think it's important, but I don't want the anti-ABAers to immediately flood my comments. I mean, I totally understand it, but I mean, what I'm trying to do is talk about reading. You know what I mean? Essentially to people who, and then often if the ABA people understand that reading is stimulus control, maybe they can go to reading instead of being with people with autism, so that the people that don't want ABA people to be with autism aren't, I don't know. So I think that it's really important that we really hear those voices and we attend to what they're saying, especially when they're substantive, because anybody on any side could just say, this is good, this is bad. I will feel bad about this always, no matter what. I will feel good about this always, no matter what. But when there are reasons and evidence and lived experiences behind it, it really gives us something to work with and something to change.
Yeah. Well, and I think transparency is so important. It's a value of mine. It's clearly a value of yours. I don't think we talk enough about how transparency is important in our field, because we enable all these problematic behaviors to continue to occur. We enable a system that continues to marginalize people and exclude them from these scholarly activities. And it's all scales of marginalization. And so when you were talking about critical thinking, I kind of thought back to the paper trail. I just did a presentation on this for the underground conference, where it was basically like how to vet people and how to vet organizations and how to like vet research and all of this. And it's like most of the time just a simple Google search on a name will bring up all the information that you could ever want or not want to know about somebody and their work and their values and their stances on these different things. With that said, I realize that I have a little more free time on my hands because I do have job flexibility and, you know, I'm at home most of the time. Um, and I realize that a lot of practitioners who are like in clinics, in homes, in schools, all these things, like they have so many things going on. The last thing they want to do is do Google searches on all these publishers and stuff like that in ABA. I get it. Um, but if someone's telling you this is out there, someone's telling you like, hey, you know, we've done the work, believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing is like I just feel that the lack of transparency just continues to perpetuate that harmful culture, that harmful stigma, that whatever the case may be. So like if you're struggling and you're not getting anywhere with publishing and you're trying to say something that's different, you're going to have a much harder fight. And that I say that as someone who's been there, who continues to be there. It sucks. And you know, keep trying. That's
Yeah.
the moral of the story. Keep trying. Um, we're challenging a system that is set up to protect people that want to stay in charge 100%. And until we can actually make things transparent and do that, it's going to stay that way.
Exactly. And I think it also goes to where you try to publish. I know, I feel
Yeah,
like we're getting really into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's a definite important conversation. When you're trying to publish, a lot of times students are told of certain journals that are like the top tier journals in their field. For us, that's JABA, Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, Journal of Experimental Analysis of Behavior, and then some offshoots of that. All the ones that say ABAI on the top right when the publication comes out. But those aren't those aren't the ones that are always challenging power, that are
no,
always providing
no.
critical analyses. So I would encourage people to look into other journals. One of the ones that I see a lot of people publish in that is actually pretty good for behavior analysis is the European, I think it's the European Journal of Behavior Analysis or something like that.
I will say a caveat to that. They published the Scrolling into Trouble article initially and had to retract it. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me retract my statement. But I mean, like there are other ones. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to go across the pond to find
Yeah,
exactly. And just because they accepted that doesn't mean, you know. Sometimes people have power, and they can use their power to get publications, and they have used it multiple times to publish. And if you're seeing somebody, I guess I might be uh, I might have done this, but I'm new, so I'm learning. If you see someone publishing in one place all the time, damn near only, there's a few things that can be happening. Maybe they, yeah, maybe that journal is the only one that's publishing that kind of research. Like a lot of places don't publish precision teaching research that shows the standard acceleration chart. Java has, in the past, I've heard they've had problems with that. I don't know if that's still true, but I've heard that in the past. So some places like it's like, okay, well, this is the place to publish this. But if they're only publishing in this one journal, it's like, okay, why? You know what I mean?
right.
Is it just easier there for you? Do you know somebody there? Are you the editor? Like, what's going on? You know, it's definitely something to kind of think about.
Yeah, ask questions. And that's the thing. That's the first part of critical thinking is ask questions. Like, how did this
Hmm.
person get here? What have they done to build their way into this? And considering the hero worship that we have, especially in ABA, I'm surprised more people don't do this and they don't just like know all the works. It's like when you go to Comic-Con and you know this person from this show, this movie, this thing, this other thing. I'm the person that does like extensive research on Wikipedia before I meet a celebrity. If I know them from only one thing and I'm like, oh, I didn't know about this and this and this and this, I'll make sure to watch it and blah blah blah. Why do we just not apply that to the critical thinking piece, but we do to the hero worship? Like, oh, I love this
Hmm.
thing. Your talk was so good, old white man. I will listen to anything you say. But why are you not like using those same questions in a critical thinking lens? To the point about the European Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, once again, me as a master's level practitioner was peer reviewing for Java. And you want to
Hmm.
tell me that's the gold standard? You want to tell
Yeah.
me that? Are you kidding me? So, like, me going in not knowing anything about what I was doing, that is who could be peer reviewing your stuff. And I would actually argue that other journals, which by the way, I think I might have published one time in an ABA journal, and I think it was behavior modification. I don't even think it was like it wasn't even any of the ABAI journals or anything like that, because I'm pretty sure they all have me like flagged on a list somewhere, and they're like, we will never ever even consider because of things. Um, but yeah, I would argue that when I have submitted to the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness, because I did a visual impairment study,
Hmm.
um, I would argue that I had actual experts reviewing my stuff on visual impairment and blindness, because the level of detail that they provided, but also the praise for like doing the type of study I was doing with a very different form of learning, which by the way was stimulus equivalence.
Hmm.
They were very complimentary, they were very kind, but I could tell that they really knew their stuff. And so that's the thing. I feel that sometimes these journals that we put on this pedestal, because we were told to put them on a pedestal, and it's continuing to reinforce in that hierarchy, we don't challenge them, we don't question them, we just say, oh well, it's Java, you know, it's readily available through the BACB. Well, someone's in bed with somebody there, which is why it's freely available. But we don't question the how we got here. We don't question the why it's put in that position. When other journals have more rigorous standards sometimes for peer review. So
Hmm.
riddle me that one, Batman.
Exactly. You just gave me a great idea. There's this journal called Emotion that I might try to apply to publish an article for my pilot study that I did before my dissertation. So we'll see if they'll accept that. I'll apply to it, and we'll see if they're friendly towards my. Because when you do single subject design, sometimes when you go into APA journals, they're like, "We do group design. You're doing single subject. No, thank you."
Right, and you know, to that point, one of the journals I published was Advances in Neurodevelopmental Disorders. So they dabble a little in some single subject design, but like the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness, they were really great. I
Oh,
really
great.
loved working with them. Um, and that's the thing, like you just kind of have to explain the rationale. You have, of course, there might be standards that they have as far as acceptance for the journal in general. So, like,
Hmm.
yeah, we have to have so many participants, or we have to have, you know, the way that it's written has to be in this format. But, um, you know, for the most part, as long as you kind of like look at those guidelines before you submit and everything, you should be okay. Um, but yeah, I would definitely challenge that I have always had an easier time and more professional discourse with journals outside of ABA, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's a testament to the unnecessary rigor that we tend to put ourselves into a corner on.
I agree. I agree. And I think that kind of going off of that kind of brings us to our next subject on the docket. Um
How do I get
and
off this topic?
no, you're fine. I think that it's a good jumping off, and if you're not done, we can keep going.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm fine. I'm done for now.
Okay.
It'll
Okay.
come up again though.
Yeah, yeah, well, definitely, because I love talking about this stuff. I think that there's a big issue with people who earn their PhDs legitimately, but and then they go into being a professor, whether research professor, teaching professor, whatever, and they have to teach coursework, and they didn't take any courses in their coursework on how to teach or on how to evoke learning. And I think that that's a big issue. One of the ways I'm going to kind of set it up, and then we could talk about it if you don't mind.
Oh, of course.
One of the things I like to say is telling isn't teaching, right? I think it's best and easiest to define teaching by its effects, which should be learning. Learning different behavior in the same context due to instruction. Whether or not teaching or learning occurred is then conditional upon the change in behavior of the learner after instruction. So every attempt at teaching is instruction until you test later to determine if learning occurred by seeing if there was a behavior change under similar conditions. And that's what I learned while earning my PhD in special education, was to change instruction based upon responses of the learner to said instruction, specialize the instruction for the learner, any learner. And that made my special education experience completely different, I think, from a lot of other people's experiences through their PhD program. What think you?
Oh man, so many things. I agree. Trash truck. So if you hear anything, it's trash truck. Um, you're talking about so many different topographies here. When somebody completes their doctorate and goes into teaching, or goes into management, or whatever the case may be, um, ultimately, unless you are specifically training for those types of environments, I would argue that one is not equipped to go into those environments. And that is me talking about myself too, because I literally came into um, teaching while I was getting my doctorate. I started doing master's level practicum coursework, which was great because I kind of learned how to do things on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might have an instructional design sort of course that helps you create course content and everything, but ultimately, like, you're probably not given a course on how to actually teach. You're not given a course on how to supervise at master's level with supervisees, because arguably you are trying to understand the content that's on the test list, and so you
Mm-hmm.
can pass the board exam. And so that was another moment that I can think of particularly when I got my certification. And this was before there was like a duration you had to wait before you could supervise others. So basically, like, when I got certified, it was 2014. Good God, I'm old. When I got that, basically the next day my boss was like, hey, so I'm going to give you a supervisee. I'm like, I'm sorry, hold the phone, I just passed the board exam. Like, I do not feel prepared, I do not feel ready. In part because I was not taught how to supervise. Now, was that a problem on behalf of my supervisors? I don't think so, because they were basically trying to teach me to get through the board exam, and the board exam didn't have a lot of emphasis on that. It didn't have the strategies. And so, like, when we go through these programs, we're not given any sort of tools or anything. Like, sometimes we might be handed the tools and be expected to figure it out ourselves. But most of the time, I feel that there's just none of that extra piece that we're required to do so much of. Like, I feel like all of my job now is not necessarily knowledge based, it's more of like experience based. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge difference. PhD is really knowledge based and not based on experience.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that a big problem that students experience but aren't necessarily able to articulate is that they have professors who never learned how to teach, particularly what they are teaching, or how like the basics of teaching and educating. And they know their content. Professors know their content very well. I don't want to poo poo on professors. The
Most of them.
most of them know their content very well, but they didn't get the opportunity to learn how to induce learning, how to make it so that when they convey information, the information is able to maintain, it's able to endure, and then it's able to be put in the student's own words and given back to the professor. So when we teach, we want to ideally teach how we test, right? Or how we expect them to test. If you want to teach something to them and you tell them and they respond to you through their verbal behavior, which is often vocal verbal behavior, then you should be testing in vocal verbal behavior. If you want them to write out the answer, then you should teach and you should get that writing back to give and then be able to give feedback on that writing so that you can shape it up so then when you're ready to test you can test through those same learning channels. That's why we have learning channels. And of course you want it to generalize to other learning channels so they can't just write it, they can also say it, they can also act it out or whatever. But when teachers think that, oh, I lectured for 2 hours, so they should know because I taught, that is not going to be super effective, especially if you're not truly getting the attention of the learner. If the learner's in the back looking at their Amazon shopping cart, then there's something wrong with your teaching. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, we could blame the learner and we could say, oh, they're learner, they're the adult, whatever. But if your educational practices aren't inducing learning, then we should look at those instructions or your instruction to fix the instruction so it has a higher probability of inducing learning.
Right. Oh man, so many different things we could talk about here. I'm so grateful that I had somebody who taught me precision teaching because I do think about learning channels a lot. I do think about those things, and I never realized how much I actually try to apply that to what I try to do. There's a course we're both teaching right now. We're actually teaching the exact same content course this term. And so part of the course is presenting a lecture and, going through PowerPoint slides and everything. And, I'll record that and I have a hard time with my buy-in because I realize how lecture alone is not effective at changing behavior or increasing knowledge. And so whereas little snippets will come around and like students might kind of be like, oh, I really appreciate how you explained this, overall we know that that's not the best way to teach. And so it's sometimes hard because I may not be developing or designing a course. I may not necessarily agree with how it's delivered and everything, but yet I am a representative of the course, and so that is challenging, especially if you have an understanding of like learning channels and stuff like that. Being disabled as well kind of adds an element to that, because I have kind of learned a skill set I need to work on and develop. Maybe I don't know if this is something I can work on and develop, but a lot of video-based responding I'm struggling with because I have auditory processing delay. If it's written, I can get through it so quickly, give tons of feedback, and I can have it done in like 5 minutes. But if it's video or auditory based, I have to rewatch things multiple times, and that's an accessibility thing for me. If I can't have captions, then I'm completely lost on what's going on. And so, like, it's also important to individualize those learning channels, and that's why I really am grateful about like precision teaching and that perspective and all of that, because when I have a student that says, hey, I really struggle with video lectures, I'm there, I get it. I can get you the transcript, I can get you, the visuals if you need those, or whatever the case may be. And so keeping that in mind as well is vital, because just because we do this lecture, we've always done a lecture, we've always done discussion forums or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right strategy, as we learned from like project follow-through as we've discussed.
Exactly. And I think that we're talking about learning channels enough to give it a little focus. I always love to say this quote I learned from Ruiz Rosales. I can't remember his full name. I'll try to figure that out. But behavior is not emitted, it is permitted by the environment. With these learning channels, we can describe ways sensory information comes in and goes out. This matrix is specifically for academic, personal, social learning, but others exist. So these learning channels, we have our sensory ins and our sensory outs. So the most common three learning channels in academics are visual input, auditory output, see, say, such as reading aloud, auditory input, writing output, hear, write, such as spelling words from dictation, and then visual input, writing output, see, write, such as solving math problems like for a test. There's also hear, say, like if a student hears a teacher say, ask a question, then they're supposed to say the response, right? That's another learning channel. But what learning channels also help us do is make sure we test how we teach. So if we notice we're doing a lot of hearsay, and then when we test, they're supposed to see right. There can be a discrepancy in their responding due to the fact that they haven't practiced enough in the learning channels that you're testing for. So these really help us as educators, as teachers, as instructors determine our instruction and see if we're effectively inducing learning.
I would love if this was just a regular part of any teacher curriculum, any level. It would be so helpful because I remember when I learned about this, my mind was blown. I was like, I never really thought about how I receive information, but then how I like regurgitate the information. But yeah, having a good understanding, I can't emphasize enough, especially if you're wanting to go into teaching full time or scholarly work or anything like that. Please look into all of this because it
Yeah.
will really help you with your perspective on education.
Exactly. And then through those learning channels, we've been able to find fluency aims. Like for reading, you should be able to see, say, letter sounds with 120 to 100 sounds per minute to get to fluency, which is the combination of accuracy plus speed, which characterizes competent proficiency. That's a SAFMED. And then, phonemic awareness. We know ones for handwriting, spelling, math, and there's so many other fluency aims that we were able to identify through our learning channels. And I just think it's really important. And if educators knew more about them, there's no such thing as learning styles, but when it comes to learning channels, there is such a thing.
I love that self-correction. My God, so the trash and recycling truck have been within like a few minutes of each other, and I feel like they're both just like sliding into home today. It's just like, like both of them have just been so loud. It's like, I'm sorry if you can hear that. So yeah, I would love to have more of this type of discussion. I would have loved to have a whole course on how to teach different classes because like I just remember when I first taught a doctorate level content course, I was terrified because I was like, I just went through this myself. Like, who am I to be able to be qualified to teach this? And that's the thing is like, not only are you trying to deliver content and you're trying to share knowledge, but you also have to have knowledge of managing others' behavior. And arguably, for somebody who doesn't read context very well sometimes, which is kind of ironic given that I decided to be a behavior analyst. But yeah, it was just really hard for me to like understand how to facilitate discussion and how to like even do just the small simple social rules of like, okay, this person has spoken quite a bit, I haven't heard from this person, how do I do this in a manner that isn't awkward and doesn't make somebody feel called out or whatever. And so like just knowing classroom management, I guess, is the term that I would kind of loosely use for this. I had no knowledge, and as an autistic person, I challenged that is like the biggest thing that I needed was how to manage classroom behavior or meeting behavior or whatever the case may be if you're off campus.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. Especially stepping into those teaching roles. It's good when you're getting opportunities to do them while you're still a student, but even when you're done with your PhD program, there's still so much work that I think that we need to do to improve as, professors. And I'm learning so much consistently. Like, I feel like I'm finally it's getting to the end of my first year being a professor, and I feel like I'm finally now really understanding the role specifically at this institution, being able to help students so much more proficiently, being able to support them, figuring out a whole bunch of stuff from my end to be just, a valid, good professor. And then also figuring out, the stuff that we may be asked to do that it's like, I'm going to do it this way because I've determined that, doing it the way that is general or some other people do it may just not work for me or may not be what I think is best for my learners. So, and all of my lived experiences and my educational experiences are going to inform those decisions. And I would hope other professors, no matter how long you've been in the game, you can also identify, hey, I have learning to do. There are ways that I can become better. Even as a student, sometimes you could tell, like, this person does not have their stuff together. They are terrible for being my professor and teaching me. I just need to. So I hear students talk about, I just need to get through this class. I mean, not as a professor anymore as much as when I was a student, because students will be more honest with other students. I would be like, I just need to get through this class and make it to the end of this semester with a grade that will, not demolish my GPA.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And gosh, yeah, I had a lot of thoughts, but then they kind of vanished. But yeah, all of that's relevant. All of it is valid. It's such a harsh shift to go from being a student right into teaching too. And I don't think we talk about that enough. That reality hit so hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you said, if you take a job, you become full time, and I know a lot of people stay in consulting while they teach, and I don't know how you could do that personally, because for me that's just like way too much. High disability. But so I took a complete 180, and so it was a huge career shift. It was a huge expectation shift. I had to learn all these new rules. I had to learn all of these expectations. So I had to learn the non-negotiables like you're talking about. Like, these are things that I can't be flexible on. These are things I have to do versus the things that I can be flexible on. Like, just because someone does it this way doesn't mean I have to do it that way. So learning all of those rules was like way more mentally taxing on me than actually ending up teaching the courses sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot. I don't think we talk about that enough. And I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know if it's a, nobody just, wants to share or has the opportunity to share because they're so busy trying to like get everything together. But yeah, I will fully admit that was that first year that I went full time into teaching, like you said, that was by far one of the hardest ones in my career. And I definitely commend anybody who makes it through that first year in particular, because I think once you make it through that first year, you're going to be okay. You build some confidence, you build some skills that, you might not have had before, but like that first year is brutal.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of creating some more hard and fast rules. I'm figuring things out, and I think now that I've gone through it, it would be cool if I had, and every emerging professor had more support. I do have support. It's not like I don't have support. I'm incredibly thankful for my support, and honestly, I wouldn't have made it through if I didn't have the support that I have. I think that there should be dedicated individuals to supporting emerging professors and walking them through things. Because, like, it's one thing where I have to reach out and ask for things because sometimes it can make you feel like, should I know this? Where is this? Where am I supposed to find this? How am I supposed to know this? Whereas another thing where somebody is explicitly explaining certain things to you that they want you to know, and that can induce learning much more quickly than me being like, I should know this, let me go figure this out because it's a problem right now.
Right. And it's a balance too. I remember as a consultant, there would be mandatory like weekly meetings or whatever that I would have to have with a supervisor, and I remember I would just sit in those meetings and I'd be like, okay, so what are we doing here? because I'm the type of person that if I do need something, I will go to somebody because I have
Mm-hmm.
no shame about doing that. But I didn't really think about the stigma that is paired with that. And that's why students don't always come to us with questions because it's like, I don't want to feel like dumb. I don't want to feel like I missed something, you know? And that's the thing. Like, if you are in teaching, try your best to make it a safe place for everybody to ask questions and to,
Mm-hmm.
reach out to you. And that's one thing that I don't think I've had as like a comment on any of my evals or anything like that where it's like I felt like I couldn't ask questions. And like the one time
Mm-hmm.
that somebody did say that, I was able to kind of dismiss it and be like, well, this other student had said this, and I know that
Mm-hmm.
situation. It was a little different. It was a bit of an exception, but for the most part, make yourself available. Make it clear to the students that, even though I do
Yeah.
have boundaries, you can ask me things, and I'm not going to intentionally make you feel bad. I know some people have a hard time receiving feedback too. So the way
Yeah.
that feedback, I deliver it sometimes very directly, and people aren't used to that. But I try to also put the caveat when they aren't familiar with me, please don't take it personal. I'm literally just trying to give you feedback and advice, and it never comes from a place of me judging you. So
Mm-hmm.
do that. Set up a good environment, please.
Yeah.
Not that I'm
And
doing
I
it
think,
already, but do
yeah.
that.
And I do want to give a shout out, a positive shout out to our university in the sense that I do feel really supportive. I feel like
Yeah.
there are multiple areas where we have ways to reach out to different people. I have regular meetings where it's really beneficial because it's like so supportive and they're asking how can we help, what do you think about this, they're encouraging me to start a lab, which I'm going to do next term, start a precision teaching lab. Like I really feel supported in this institution and by the faculty members, by the other faculty members, just because they are also like I feel like they are also in the trenches with me, and they're like, hey, this is what I've learned, this is what I'm experiencing, let's communicate. There's open lines, there's quick and rapid feedback and responses. And when I do ask for things and not like, you don't know that, they're like, oh, it's this, that, and the third. Oh, let's bring this person in because they're really good at this. And then they're like, hey, if you didn't already have access to these resources, not just, oh, it's over here, here are the resources. Here, I'm going to link them to you so that you have easy access to them. And feel free to, ask anytime. Don't feel, bad about it. I really do like that about our institution because I have felt like I don't have to worry about asking. Whereas if I was at a different institution, I might feel differently. I don't know, but like, I mean, at least at this one, I do feel comfortable about that with our colleagues. Uh, yeah. So, and I've learned some things, when it comes to how to better supervise students in certain ways. When it comes to, hey, if you feel like you're having a lot of meetings, sometimes one thing that's good is to have like a group meeting with students so that they can also communicate with each other, so that they can help each other throughout this process, especially when they're at different levels. Some people have already been through the process, and it's a different perspective of a student helping another student that's been through the process than the professor helping a student that's going through the process.
It's like a pyramidal peer mentorship sort of situation.
Yeah.
And I definitely concur with your experiences on like where we're at currently. Things are very supported, and my challenge becomes there's too many people, and sometimes I may not know who to reach out to,
Yeah.
and be like, okay, so this is something completely novel. Okay, now I have all these people that I could possibly reach out to. I don't know which one. So
Yeah.
sometimes we play the roulette game. It's like, let's just see who gets to hear from me today.
And they're really good at just pulling the right person in, like, oh, hey,
Right.
this is this person. And it's like, oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's a learning curve for us too. And I think people are very forgiving of that. But I would hope that if you go into teaching, regardless of whether it's in higher ed or not, that you would be receptive to also teaching people who are coming into the role. I would
Hmm.
hope. Now, I know that
Yeah.
there are definitely some people I've come in contact with where I'm like, I don't know why you chose to go into academia, but here we are. But I think that we're generally surrounded by people who are like interested in teaching and want to do so, which is great. It's a safe place for that.
Same. And I think that I remember when I was in undergrad around 2014, was when
When I got
yeah, I
started,
graduated. Yeah.
love that for me.
I remember some of my professors were like, there were some older ones then that it's like, even then I was like, this ain't right and this don't really fly. And now I'm no like I think that they really really wouldn't fly. A lot of inappropriate behavior that I can't imagine like going to college in the 90s, 80s,
Oh
what
yeah,
have you. And it's just like perverts, professors. And I'm sure there still are now, don't get me
yeah,
wrong, but it's just like
everywhere.
running rampant with no oversight whatsoever, or not even a way to, I don't know. I mean, I've heard some stuff about Harvard professors that have tenure to this day that still do that. But like I can only imagine it was so much worse back then. And I really always focus and make sure that I'm introspective in how I'm behaving, especially with different students, just so that I don't come across a certain way. I already know that I don't mean the impact to come across a certain way, but it's also about how I select my words, how I go about supporting students, and all that. Those all matter. And if I'm not intentional, then I can be accidental in my impact.
Absolutely. Intention does not equate to impact. And while your intention can come across in your impact, unfortunately, sometimes that may not be the case and there might be a mismatch. But that goes to anything in life too. And I feel that just being a decent human being just means that you're willing to accept that your actions can impact people in a negative manner and that you try to, you know, make up for those, make amends, do any sort of restorative justice toward those. Um, but yeah, it definitely speaks to people who are in these positions of power who really need to be setting that standard. And I'm with you. Like, I read things all the time and I see things all the time because I do a lot of documentaries. A lot of my books that I read are not fiction. And so I read all these horror stories about, especially like women and, you know, BIPOC women in particular, like going through these really challenging situations with individuals with authority who have tenure um, and I would actually argue as somebody who would love the job security of tenure, I don't know that that's it, you know?
Yeah,
So that's a
yeah.
whole other conversation though.
And on that note, we're going to remind you to like, share, subscribe, comment, reply to a comment. We want to hear from y'all, especially. I think we had a great conversation today. I can think of at least 4 different clips that I'm going to make. I got 2 very long flights, and I'm going to buy the Wi Fi so I can make the
Yeah.
clips.
Well, caveat to that, like when we put out clips, we may not always have the context with the clips, and so like if the impact is felt or whatever, you know, I just kind of want to mention that because there have definitely been a couple of videos that we've had where context has not been discussed, and yeah, it's just important
we,
to kind of mention that.
I agree because I only get 3 minutes. People don't understand. You only get 3 minutes in a
Yeah,
reel. You cannot go over 3 minutes or else it won't be shared to a wider audience and all these other things. So you got three, I got 3 minutes, and people are like, well, what about nuance? Yeah, and it's like you don't create content you don't know, so I can't be too
right.
mad with you. So I gotta explain it to you, and hopefully it'll get through to you. If not, you're just gonna be an angry commenter, and then I'm just gonna have to go about my day.